welcome. Thank you all so much for being here, taking an hour out of your day to join us for a really important conversation. I'm really excited here to be joined with some of our phenomenal consultants at Perfecta to have an overdue discussion on what in the world is going on in the diversity, equity, and inclusion industry right now in 2025. Just a few housekeeping rules. We definitely want to hear from you all today, so please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. Let us know what you want to get out of it. We do have some questions we're going to be asking you all throughout this discussion. So don't be shy. If you're just now joining in, I said this earlier, and I just want to say it again, that we are not here to just be in conversation, but to also build community. So I want you all to connect with us, hopefully, but also connect with one another. Thought that this conversation was just a really important and timely one to have because of the work that we do at Perfecta and serving our clients, and just the amount of emotion and overwhelm that we are all seeing and experiencing with this new administration and in the media today. So I have a few questions I'm going to ask our panelists. I will ask them to introduce themselves in just a couple of minutes. But if you all have any questions that you also want to get answered today, please drop those questions in the chat and we'll try to get through as many as possible. This is an opportunity for us to just hold space for one another. And so if you all are feeling just frustrated or not sure what to do next, what my hope is that you all will leave today feeling a bit of relief, some optimism, but most importantly, feeling seen, feeling validated, and just know that you are not going through this alone. We are all just trying to figure it out. This is also going to be recorded, so we are going to be sharing a recording out after this just to make sure that you all have access to it. I also just want to point out that you can turn on the closed captions if that's going to be helpful for you today. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So just to tell you all a little bit about Perfecta, if you are new to Perfecta and what we do, we are a boutique talent development agency that really focuses on helping organizations build sorry, I'm losing my words, but build and develop inclusive and emotionally safe workplace cultures where everyone can feel as though they belong. So we've had the pleasure of working with some amazing companies over the last several years, helping them creating DEI strategies, roadmaps, launching employee resource groups, launching DEI committees, councils, but also providing bespoke trainings and facilitations for thousands and thousands of folks across the globe. I'm really excited to see some of our clients here joining today. So welcome y'all. I don't want to shout out every single one of y'all, but I just want you to know that we do see you here. So thank you for being here. And again, just a moment of gratitude for all the organizations that we do get to work with. If I have not had the opportunity to meet you, my name is Letitia Bird. I'm the CEO of Perfecta. And what I really want today is to really center the voices of the amazing team that shows up for our clients every day. And so really my role in this is to more so be a moderator to help guide the conversation. But y'all are in for a treat. You all really get to hear from some talented women in this space. So I'm just going to go kind of how the slide is structured here, and I'll turn it over to Janelle to kick off introduction, and then we'll go to Liz and then Amelia. So don't be shy, y'all. Say hello in the chat. Say welcome to all of our panelists today, and we'll go ahead and get into it.
Thanks, Letitia, and hello, everybody. I am calling in from Toronto myself, so probably one of the only Canadians on this conversation, but excited to dig into the conversation with all of you today. There's so much happening in our space. I've been in DEI and social impact for the better part of 17 years, so I love speaking with clients about strategy, talking about how DEI can really be embedded into everything that a company does, to the top down, bottom up, and really into the DNA. And I truly believe that this is a moment in time for us, one that we will get past and get over. So really excited to dig into the conversation today, and thank you so much for being with us.
Hey everyone, I'm Liz, based in Washington, D.C., and I have been in the DEI space for about 10 plus years. I wanted to shout out my former chief of the Office of Equity from DC Public Schools, Bren Elliott. I see you in the chat, and I just feel like I'm already in community for folks who have really guided where I am in this journey. So for you to be on this call means so much to me. And then to be here with my Perfeqta family and just other practitioners who are really feeling this in a different way. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amelia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amelia Avery Bradley, coming from Dallas, Texas, and I have been in the inclusion and impact space for over 13 years, and I'm very excited to be a part of this conversation. A lot of the work that I do centers around global cultural awareness, as well as connectivity and engagement with a lot of our teams. So just being in this space, holding space with all of you, and being able to understand more about your journeys as well as what's going on in your different environments is something that I'm looking forward to learning more about, but then sharing with you just some of the tools and some of the things that I've been able to anchor around. So very excited to be here. And then let me see. I'm not passing. I'm passing it back to Letitia. Are we doing this poll right now? I see a poll popped up. Does everyone have that up right now?
Yes, I think Letitia gave an intro, but Letitia, you were muted.
Oh
So
yeah, I'm so sorry. I was muted. It's a lot of different screens over here. I'm trying to navigate. So thank you. So yes, if you all could answer this quick question. The question that we have for you right now is, how are you feeling about DEI in your workplace? So 4 options: hopeful, concerned, exhausted, motivated. Just a heads up, we do have a few poll questions we are going to be asking you all just to kind of get a feel of the energy in the Zoom room. Yeah, we just want to know, how are you all feeling right now today? And it looks like the responses are a little all over the place. So we'll give it just a few more seconds as those responses come in. These responses are anonymous, y'all, so don't be afraid of hitting the first one that really resonates with you. And also just want to appreciate the vulnerability here. Okay, just 10 more seconds as those responses are coming in. It looks like over half of us are concerned. That's the #1 response. Understandably so, right? We're going to talk about some of those concerns today. Seeing a hopeful. Shout out to the 21% that feel hopeful. I know that I feel hopeful. All right, and let's go ahead and close this and let me share the results. Thank you, Maria. So we have 55% that said concerned, 23% said exhausted, 21% said hopeful, and 17% said motivated. Sorry, I don't know if all of the questions were asked. Were you all able to get through all 5 questions? Okay, awesome. So then let's go through all of these right now. Which best describes your company's approach to DEI in 2025? Majority of you all said DEI is still a priority and well supported. DEI has been adjusted but remains in place. So those were the top 2 responses. How prepared do you feel to navigate DEI in 2025? Majority of you all said either somewhat prepared or not sure. The next question was, what type of pushback has been most prevalent in your organization? And most of you all said it was between legal policy shifts as well as budget cuts and funding loss? And the last question here is, where do you feel DEI efforts should be prioritized moving forward? And most of you all here said leadership accountability. So those were the results. If you have any additional thoughts or feedback, feel free to put that in the chat, but I don't want to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get into the first question. So this is for all of our panelists, whoever would like to answer first. Please share one word you would use to describe the current state of DEI and why.
I'll share my word, and it's transformative. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think that throughout history, we have always seen change. And so, how do we take this opportunity to transform what we're seeing now into something that is, number one, going to be a little bit more sustainable, possibly something that is going to be anchored more as a fabric, as Janelle mentioned, in our organizations? I'm a firm believer that DEI shouldn't be necessarily siloed in the ways that it has in more of a business practice and an essential. So I think that this change may bring about that transformation. So transformation is my word.
I think for me, and probably a lot of you folks are feeling it as well, it just feels very polarized right now. I think in terms of the current state, there really seems to be, obviously we're seeing in the media and, from policy and all that, a lot of pushback. But at the same time, there's a lot of folks who are still deeply committed to this work and deeply invested in this work as well. So it really does seem like there's quite two very distinct opposite sides of the spectrum as it relates to DEI right now. And what's interesting about it is I think that on the one side where we're seeing the pushback, I think a lot of it is because sort of the true essence of DEI has been very diluted. So that would be mine. It's just, it's very, very polarized right now.
I agree with you, Janelle. I say my word is misinformed. Like, you have so many people that are just committed to the misinformation. And that's the piece that's so exhausting, because when I have a conversation with people, I'm like, that's not what it is. Like, you really don't want to know what it is. You just want to willfully be ignorant in this space. And that's the part that I'm like, if you're really open to having a real conversation, I'm not saying we have to agree, but if you are open to just having a conversation about what it is for real, I'm good. But what I'm finding is people know what it is and they know what it's not. They are just committed to pushing this misinformation. And that is a piece that's so frustrating, is that's not what it is. So I would say willfully misinformed. I know it's supposed to be one word, but two for me.
Well, nice to see you, Shay, and thank you for jumping in.
Yes, I wouldn't miss it for anything.
That's a good word. And this industry has always experienced pushback, or we are constantly always talking about the business case and the why behind it, right? But to wake up every day and see something else happening in the headlines, and so many threads and tweets and LinkedIn posts and TikToks about what it is and what it is not, it is quite overwhelming at the same time. So let's go ahead and jump into the next question. Janelle, this one is for you. How can companies make DEI a lasting part of their culture instead of something that fades when leadership changes or priorities shift?
That's a really great question, Letitia. And I think it's kind of going back to the origins of what culture actually is within a company. I mean, DEI is something that benefits everybody in the workplace. I see it as a strategic asset, just like Amelia said. It's definitely a lever for culture. And really and truly, in many of the principles around DEI, it's how a company should actually be run. And it should just be incorporated into, I think, everything that a company does. But, when companies think about culture, I think even that word has been so diluted with, fun lunches and foosball tables and those things. That's not what culture actually is. So when companies actually think about, the work to do, understanding that culture is shared values, understanding that culture is beliefs and attitudes and behaviors and, social norms within the workplace. It's around how employees interact with one another, often described as really just how things are done within a company that kind of influences everything. So I really think that how companies can sort of seek to ensure that it doesn't get lost and is embedded in their culture, is really just going back to the origins of culture. How is DEI now, or, in the future, how are you driving it to be embedded into the core values of your organization? So those beliefs that kind of guide decision making, behavior, how things are done, even in terms of things like leadership style. So how leaders communicate, how leaders support employees, how leaders inspire employees, the actual, work environment. I know that over the last couple of years, there's been a lot around, return to office and such, and there hasn't necessarily been the focus on, is that actually giving employees what they need to succeed? So really thinking about the physical, the emotional environment, the support, the office layout. I mean, I'm a migraine sufferer as an example. So fluorescent lights within the context of an office will 9 times out of 10 really, do harm to me. So I think companies really need to think about those cultural elements that they're driving, those unwritten rules, those written rules, those expectations that kind of shape what they do on a day-to-day basis, and ensure that all of those things, DEI is embedded, it's sort of checked off, it becomes the lens through which they're looking at all of that. So, I think that with the conversation just around, well, we should kind of do away with DEI, I think it's more so, well, what does your company want to be known for? How do you want to celebrate your people? How do you want your company to run? Like, what do you want people externally to say about the internal culture of your company? And then to me, DEI is just kind of infused and embedded into all of those principles that really actually drive culture. So if you're having difficulty as a practitioner, even in having those conversations around DEI, then maybe, stop the DEI conversation. Let's just talk about culture and really get down to the nitty gritty and the definitions of what culture actually is and how culture is actually driven. And then what you'll actually find is that you can infuse diversity, equity, and inclusion into many of the things that actually define a company's culture. And, don't be afraid to challenge folks as well. If you're talking to a leader or the leaders of the leaders within the company, where do they want the company to be in 5 to 10 years? What do they want it to be known for? What do they want retention stats and all those things to look like? It's easy for companies to say, oh, we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't do that. But it's like, for every decision that you make on one way, you're actually deciding on another way. And, the inverse can also be true. So I think companies need to really, it's easy to kind of get caught up in what's happening in the media and all those things right now, but companies really need to take a step back and pause and really understand, what is the type of company I want to have, that I want to drive, that I want to be a part of, and how am I doing that from a cultural aspect? And then really and truly, DEI just kind of fits right into that. Long-winded answer, Letitia, but that's what I would say.
No, that was great. Thank you, Janelle. I'm not sure if our other panelists wanted to add on to that. Well, I think you covered it. Okay, I'm going to shift to Liz. Liz, what are some examples of organizations that are keeping DEI efforts strong right now? What are they doing? I know we've seen in the news a lot about, certain companies that are, not continuing to do the work, they're cutting their teams, right? Just know that the media is intentional about feeding you this information. And I will say, all of our clients at Perfeqta, shout out to y'all, have doubled down, right? And they're, we're having conversations within around how do we reinforce our commitment, to our people. There are many companies that are continuing to do the work, and there's a lot of noise online right now. And so, Liz, if you don't mind just sharing some examples that you've seen, I think that might be really helpful for everyone that is trying to figure out, how do you continue to, keep that momentum going.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share a few because there are many, but I first want to start by kind of double clicking what you just shared, Letitia. A lot of what we're seeing right now in the media, focusing on the companies that are scaling back, in my opinion, is a fear tactic. And the intent there is for there to be a domino effect. So we can think, hey, these major companies, these Fortune 500 companies are scaling back, and that's supposed to be a signal to other companies to scale back. However, what I was kind of affirmed by was when you opened up the poll to see that about 50% of the folks on the call said, hey, we're actually standing by DEI at my company and the work continues. And then about 30% said, hey, we're making some shifts and changes in language, but the work continues. So I want us to keep that in mind and not get wrapped up on the fact that things are scaling back, while also being mindful that there are those of us who are feeling that impact. I was laid off by Google a couple of years ago, and those layoffs continue. So I want to be mindful and hold that in this space. But with that being said, a few of the companies that have stood by this work that stand out to me are one, Apple, and they're kind of framing the work around this messaging of, diversity is innovation. Like that's what it leads to. Diversity, there's still a business case for that. And I always want to be mindful during these moments of the messaging that people seem to stand by: innovation, culture, values, even though they have such an issue with the D, the E, and the I in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think there's opportunities similar to what Janelle said to think about other ways to frame the work while still doing the work. Another one that I know we've all been talking about is Costco. One thing about Costco, though, is they do not have a public relations team. So that I found to be very interesting. And we saw that Reverend Al Sharpton recently did kind of like a boycott or a buy-in, having the community come in to pour in our dollars to Costco since they're supporting us. One that's very interesting that I haven't heard much about, but I feel like this aligns with the fact that real G's move in silence, are keep in mind the companies that are doing the work and they're not in the media as being framed as doubling down. So for example, The Gap. I want to read something that is very consistent across their messaging about how they frame the work. And I think there's something to be said here for the companies that ground the work not in 2020 feeling forced to make a change, but like it's rooted in their history and culture. So The Gap, they frame their messaging as, in 1969, inclusivity meant not just finding a pair of jeans that fit Don's 6'4" frame, but creating a retail experience for all. We believe that when you decide that inclusion is not optional, not only do the gaps between us close, but a whole new world of possibilities open. What that signals to me is an example of companies that are doing this work because it's grounded in their founding, it's grounded in their history, not ones that felt pressured to do something and then now literally 4 to 5 years later, they can't wait to scale back. And then one other, Ben and Jerry's. This is just another example of a company we never have to wonder where they stand on an issue. But I understand that these are companies that are led by people who carry privilege, and they get to sometimes make more ostentatious and ambitious goals and kind of take a more unapologetic approach to the work. But one more that I want to name, y'all, that we should remember: Black-owned businesses are not scaling back DEI. Like, there are still opportunities to support Black and Brown-owned businesses that continue to put us first. So while we're kind of feeling the pressure of major retailers and major corporations scaling back the work, remember, we can continue to patronize Black and Brown-owned businesses. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, I love me some Ben& Jerry's for sure. I will continue to eat their ice cream. But thank you for sharing that statement from The Gap as well too. And just some of the words that you shared around the, phrasing or reframing of those particular words. We are definitely going to get into that more. So I appreciate you bringing that up too. All right, my next question now is for Amelia. How can leaders have real, honest conversations about DEI without it feeling like corporate messaging or damage control?
So I think it's going to be damage control, whether you are in it or not, to a certain extent, just understanding the environment that we're in, that you want to really be able to be transparent and anchor into those core values, right? Anchoring into why this is important to your organization. Also, how it has a much larger centering on either how you provide services to your B2B, to your clientele, to the various groups that you are offering your services to, whether that's a consumer or whether that's a business. And then the one thing that always comes to mind is that we don't ever question when we're marketing towards someone, right? We don't ever segment out marketing, right? When we want to position a product in the industry, we don't say, okay, well, we want to be delicate or we want to omit women, or we want to omit this group, right? L'Oreal is never going to do that, right? As long as they're making makeup, and they're going to continue to put messaging out and be transparent and lean in. And so I think that taking in this same perspective of the variance of individuals that we want to open things up and to make sure that we're inclusive of. There's no difference in us thinking about the inclusion in our organization versus the inclusion in our marketing and in our branding. They're the same. We're all the same people. So how are you going to communicate to your customers? How are you going to communicate to your clients? You want to be as transparent as you can be. You want to anchor into core values. You want to have distinct messaging. You're thinking about the risk always. And I know that that's the elephant in the room, right? Is saying, okay, there is a risk associated with this, but how do we tailor this messaging around being available, being open, and being transparent? And I think that that's hugely important. I'm a big person around transparency. And so I think that communicating that into these environments is going to be very important, as well as being ahead of the curve, not being so reactive, but being more on a place of offense instead of defense, right? Because a lot of this is very reactionary. And when something changes, then we're like, oh, well, we should say something. No, say more now, right? Say the thing now, as opposed to waiting for a reaction or for something to happen for you to be able to say something and do something.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. How can we be more proactive and less reactive? Because it looks like the media and the news is going to continue to run with all of these stories, and it seems to be no turning back. I know that
Creating the narrative is really
yes,
important. Create
yes.
your narrative. Think about your organization. Create that narrative. Think about the individuals that you're speaking to your teams, leaning into the data, right? A lot of us aren't having these conversations, but the data shows the benefits of this work. We look at data for everything, right? We look at data for acquisition and retention and all these other places. So let's make sure that we're bringing in those core components that the data is showing this, right? Liz just brought up a lot of various statistics around organizations. Apple is a great example. How are they leaning in? They're great about data. So even if you have to bring data into the conversations, beginning to shift these narratives and having a counter narrative to the fear mongering that's happening in the media, because that's essentially what that is.
And the thing is that your employees are having conversations, whether it is being brought to your HR, culture, DEI team, leadership team, they are having these conversations. And so why not be a part of it? Amelia, I love what you said about, really creating that narrative. So there's been a lot of shifting that we've seen with the word. Should we still say DEI? Should we not say DEI? Should we say values? Should we say belonging, culture? What is the thing? And so, Janelle, my question is, how can companies make sure that a name change does not dilute the impact of the work? I know that's a question I'm sure many of you all have had. There's so much to be said there, but Janelle would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Atisha. And I know it's, as you said, I think most people are thinking about it. It's like, how can we still kind of keep driving this without, getting people's backs up against a wall and all those kinds of things. And I think my short answer, and then I'll elaborate on it, is really go back to the essence and go back to the intent of the work. I think DEI was never something that it was intended to sit off to the side, sit on the side of somebody's desk. It was always intended to bring together a company, to look at it from a holistic standpoint, to look at the systems, the structures, the processes, those norms that I talked about, and to look critically at all of those things that a company was already operating in and already doing from the lens of, well, did we miss something 50 years ago, 60 years ago when we started our company, from the lens of being more diverse, being more equitable, being more inclusive. So I really think that as long as the intention to look at those systems, to look at the structures, to look at those processes stays the same, I, for one, I'm less concerned about the naming conventions. I think that the opportunity really exists when you're having conversations with folks to help to kind of make DEI be the lens, to help to kind of shift and almost drive change. And for all of you on the call, who are DEI leaders within your companies, you are change makers. You are strategists who are driving massive cultural change within your companies. And that is not an easy thing to do at all. But if you think about why DEI was started, so that within a company, if someone was qualified to work there, they could feel included in their work. They could feel respected and have conversations with their colleagues where they didn't have to have fear of reprisal or fear of discrimination or fear of biases or any of those things. All of that essence still remains true today. And even for, I think, the most negative of sort of DEI deniers, no one can deny that a respectful workplace is something that every single employee should be able to bank on. And it should essentially be a right in working there, that I myself can work at a company. I have the tools to do my best work. I can be respected in whatever conversation I have. You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with the things I say. You don't have to agree with anything, even in me, but you do have to respect me as a colleague. So I think it's almost distilling the messages down to their sort of most granular form in terms of what are we actually trying to establish. And what we're actually trying to establish is that any and everybody who is qualified should be able to work at companies and to be promoted within those companies. And it's funny, and I'll digress just for 1 second on this whole debate around meritocracy. If companies were really established on a meritocracy, DI would never have been needed in the first place. So to really kind of just take it back to what was DI actually intended to do. And Amelia, it's funny, your point just around marketing, I was thinking about it a little bit earlier. No company ever shies away from targeting specific demographics to sell their products from a consumer standpoint or whatever that might be. No one gets their backs up against the wall when, like, oh, you know what, we're going to target women, or we're going to target seniors or youth or whatever that might be. It's all okay if it serves to benefit the organization from a revenue generating standpoint. But if you're actually thinking about it from an employer brand standpoint and attraction, retention, then all of a sudden we all have all of these feelings towards it. So I think that that's, regardless of the name, it's really to look at the intention behind it. And I also think that if you're having conversations with leaders who are fearful, perhaps they do have some concerns around compliance or litigation or whatever that might be, really just take that conversation down to its sort of most granular essence around what it was originally intended to do. And look at the systems within your company. Are the systems broken? If at the end of the day you've analyzed your system structure, processes, and there's nothing that needs to be changed, great. But if there are things that need to be changed, then they should be changed, because again, every employee who works there has the opportunity, should have the opportunity to work in a respectful workplace. And coming back to that other earlier sort of cultural piece that I mentioned, those accepted behaviors, those cultural norms, this is just the way that we do things within our company. All of those things actually drive the culture of your company. So some of those things are not okay. And I've heard and seen with companies where, there's a bad actor, but they're a really, really great performer, so we keep them around. That signals to the rest of the company and the rest of the business around what behavior is acceptable. So those are the types of things, when you think of inclusion, you think of equity, those are the types of things that those behaviors are often sort of grounded in or designed to actually weed out. So when you're having conversations internally, really ask, well, okay, let's change a naming convention, sure. But if we have metrics to support our attraction, our recruitment, our retention of top talent, if we want to create the type of workplace where we are human and we are connected and we're kind to one another and respectful of one another, but at the same time, we're also high performing, then even having things in place on, as an example, a performance management process, having a 360 review, can mitigate bias from your leader, can mitigate recency bias, can mitigate a whole bunch of biases that actually help to identify, hey, this person is on the right track and they're living our norms and they're living our values, and maybe they should, be promoted within our company. But without some of those strategic things in place, you can miss things. And I think that that's why the data is already out there to support how DEI actually serves to benefit a company, benefit the bottom line, and benefit all of those things. So I think that is what I would say is don't get so caught up in sort of the naming conventions of DEI, but really have the challenging conversations, ask the questions around the intention behind it. And as long as you keep the intention, to design a workplace where everybody can do their best work and they are invited to the company and they feel like they can thrive, then I personally, I'm okay with whatever we end up calling it. But again, DEI was never intended to be something that kind of just sat over here. It was always intended to be something that looked at systems, structures, policies, procedures, those cultural norms, and evaluated from those lens so you can make companies better so that everybody can benefit. I'm sure we're all seeing the things on LinkedIn around, DEI was never about race and creed, but that's why you have lactation rooms in companies. That's why you have ramps for those who are physically disabled. That's why you actually have things like take your daughter to work day or your kids to work day. So you have young people who might not have the opportunity to be exposed to a certain, workplace or a certain industry to be exposed to those things. There are so many things that because DEI exists now exist within companies in the way that they do things. And I would hate to see those things get lost because we're so kind of caught up on the naming conventions. So yeah, I think, if you're having those conversations, that would certainly be my advice to you is really get granular with whomever you're speaking to on what their intention is, the company's intention around this work is, and the essence of it, and maintain that essence, measure on the essence, and not get so caught up. Because I do think the pendulum has swung really, really far right now. But like anything else, I think it's going to come back to a state of normalcy somewhere in the middle.
Woo! Janelle, you just dropped so many gems. Oh my goodness. Y'all, is this resonating? Just drop a yes in the chat. Let us know because I could write a whole essay about what you just said, Janelle. That was so good. So you're seeing all the love come through. Lucilla said, mic drop, we can just end the panel right now. But I just want to see if Amelia or Liz, did y'all have anything that y'all wanted to add onto that? Because yeah, no,
Every
How
time
can
Janelle
you?
goes, it's like,
Yeah,
nope.
I'm like, where?
I
What
don't
is
know. I mean,
happening?
she said the things. I'm speechless over here. I really am. Woo, that was good. That the essence is what I heard is the essence. Do not lose the essence. It is becoming a distraction right now. So focus on the essence. I do want to jump to a question, and this is maybe for Amelia or Liz, if either one of y'all want to jump in, or even Janelle, want to give you time to, drink some water. But this was a really good question. And this is actually something that we talk a lot about with our clients and on the team is so the ultimate goal would be not to have a DEI specific department or function and for it to be embedded in the company as a whole. That's a really good question. Amelia, Liz, what are y'all's thoughts on that?
I mean, I believe. Oh, go ahead, Liz. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like that is great in theory. Ideally, if we're talking to the Ben and Jerry's of the world, I can definitely believe that's happening. If we're talking to Black-owned companies, even though all your skin folk ain't your kinfolk, but I can believe that's happening. But I think that having the DEI teams presented itself as a level of accountability until we get to that point in the work. And now, unfortunately, as we can see, people are not only stepping away from the DEI teams, they're hoping to get rid of the work altogether. So that's my take on it. Like in theory, like in an ideal world, once we've shifted the mindsets, the policies, the practices, the culture, but I think it's very few companies that are at that place where I can believe without that accountability metric that it would truly happen. Amelia?
Yeah, I was going to share that same sentiment, especially at the leadership level, right? When we're thinking about decisions being made, I think that you need that core kind of group to drive accountability. Because as it was mentioned earlier, that we don't have the accountability there. So who's going to keep these individuals accountable? Who's going to keep the processes accountable? Who's going to keep these components accountable when we don't have a DEI practitioner or a specialist in these spaces? And so I think that you do need someone that is saying, I'm going to ensure this level of accountability in these spaces as you would any other function, right? If you're thinking about marketing leader, if you're thinking about operations leader, if you're thinking about all of these spaces where you have to have leadership and someone to say, okay, I'm going to be helping to support and drive these functions, even if it is a multitude where they're hosting other functions as well. So if you think about an engagement team, if you think about a communications team, if you think about these different places where this work has lived and where it's really important. But I think that having someone or individuals, a team as it may sit, being really embedded into the organization is really, really important for a multitude of reasons. But I think that those individuals really need support. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but I think that this is no way, shape, or form a one person army, right? This is not a one person army. This is a, a area that needs to be supportive of all functions and all functions within an organization to actually have some sort of training and awareness around the work and what it is and what it's doing and how it's functioning.
And I agree with both of them. I think I want to clarify something that I said. When I say embedded into the work, I don't mean that it'll just automatically be embedded into the work. So I agree with the sentiment around, having teams and having individuals who are responsible for it, to both Liz and Amelia's point around that accountability piece, 100%. But I think having that broader sort of aspirational goal that essentially when you get to the place where your DEI is mature within your company, it's actually not something that then sits siloed. It is something at that point that is fully embedded into your company, into your cultural norms. And that really should, as DEI practitioners, that really should ultimately be our goal, where we don't have to exist because we're off to the side here and we're trying to sort of, push and cram things in. But the company on the whole, every department, top down, bottom up, recognizes that this just needs to be the way that we do things. And yes, some companies might get there in 5 years, some companies might get there in 10 years, some companies might never get there, and that's just the reality. But I think that that's a part of what the goal should be, because if you think of from a marketing standpoint, it should be embedded into how you market externally and internally. From a sales standpoint, how you sell, the conversations that are being had, but either from a consumer standpoint or even B2B. Other companies want to know what companies are doing in this area. And even from the perspective, I've sold products and showing up as an all-female sales team to a particular brand, which was a makeup brand. They were so enthralled with the fact that they weren't being sold to by men that it made a difference in us actually being able to sell that product. So these are the types of things, when I say embedded, it serves to benefit every single department within your company. And that's why I think that the goal should ultimately be to have it embedded into every single department and not from a siloed standpoint. But 100%, I think when you're starting out, you need to have somebody who is driving it. But I even think that from what lands well with folks and what perhaps doesn't get, some backs up against the wall, particularly in this kind of polarized geopolitical environment, is to say, well, ultimately, this is where we want to go. And these are the steps that we think we actually need to take to get there. But this is not how we sort of envision things going forever. So I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you for adding that, and thank you, ladies, for answering that question so gracefully. It is really important for us to be savvy and strategic and ensuring that we're getting the resources and the support, because this work has been historically under supported. It has kind of been just over here, somebody else is working on it, right? Where really everyone should be responsible for this somehow, some way, from leadership to the folks that are, supporting customers, supporting clients, right? So I am hopeful that we will be able to just start to be a bit more innovative around how the work is structured, how it's being communicated, because there's a lot of eyes on this industry and on this work right now. Given that we've gone through a lot of change, we all know that change can be very exhausting, very tiring. I know I've been sleeping 10 hours every night since January, what date was that? 18th. And so I do want to just pose this question to Liz. Because this work can feel exhausting, especially for the people that are doing this work, responsible for it, really invested in it right now, how would you recommend that we stay informed, and we keep going without burning out? What recommendations do you have for us?
So one, I'll be honest and vulnerable in saying that my answer to this question might sound nice, but I need to remember to take my own advice as I share this. But the first thing that I will say is, one, seeing this as a moment for Sankofa, how can we learn from the past? As Janelle mentioned, the pendulum does swing, and this is not the first time in history that we've made advancements and then the opposition tries to push us back. So is there an opportunity to learn from that and kind of give us a sense of optimism to know that the pendulum will swing back in our favor? Even thinking about how last year critical race theory was what they were trying to go after, and they acknowledged and realized it didn't have any legs. DEI clearly has some legs, and so that's why they're trying to sink their teeth into it. But I am just trying to remain optimistic in knowing that decades from now, when our children and our grandchildren are going through the history books, this is going to be in it, y'all. And we're on the right side of history. So that helps to keep me grounded. In addition to that, there's a theory that I've been learning and once again, trying to lean into, Mel Robbins' theory of the let them theory, where it's like, look, everyone, let's hang up our capes. We tried to tell you 92%. The first time it was 94%. Let you learn the hard way, let you do you, and then don't come looking for me when the time comes, because I already tried to tell you. But then with that, with the let them theory, I would also like to add the caveat of remind them, because a lot of people have questioned the effectiveness of DEI work, saying that it's performative, saying that it doesn't do anything. But as Amelia mentioned earlier, we have the data to back it up. And unfortunately, people are having to learn the hard way to say, oh, so that's what the DEI work was about, when they see everything that's being scaled back. And they start to learn, like Janelle said, that, oh, my workplace is not a respectful place. I'm not respected in my work anymore. I have to do this, that, and the third to go through a promotion. Unfortunately, some people have to learn by the proximity of their experiences, because they didn't want to listen to the experiences of many Black women specifically who are leaning into DEI work in this role. And then the last thing that I'll say is something that I learned at DC Public Schools and that I've been imparting on, my Perfeqta team here, is this concept of sphere of influence, locus of control, and just really trying to hone in on what can I do right now within my locus of control? Where can I lean on others in my network as far as expanding my sphere of influence? And then whatever's out of my control, how can I just let that be? How can I take that off my plate? How can I remove the weight of the burden of responsibility from my shoulders so I can sustain myself in this work? So those are some of the things that I'm keeping in mind. And once again, I'm trying to remember to take my own advice.
Thank you, Liz. It's always easy to give advice and, sometimes not take our own. And so I appreciate you for that reminder. I think even for me, I've really had to narrow down on some of the sources that I trust, because there are a lot of different sources and conversations online. And the question that I always come back to is my voice useful here? Is it necessary here? Must I respond? Because I think Shay said it earlier, misinformed, right? A lot of folks are misinformed. They don't really know what this work actually looks like. And so there's just so many opinions out there, right? And so I always come back to, is my energy and attention needed in this conversation, especially online? 9 times out of 10, it's not, because we do have clients and there are companies that are doing the work that we are committed to working with. Self-preservation. I've talked to a lot of my peers in this space, and they are all saying, I am really focused on self-preservation, getting off of my phone and getting in community, right? And so please take the time that you need to step away, take breaks. There's always going to be breaking news every other hour, right? So if you take a few hours from not looking at the news, it's not going to, you might miss out on a lot, but it'll be there when you get back to it, right? Because none of this can be really solved in a day. So I just want to remind you all of self-preservation. We also did a panel, Perfeqta panel. I think that was, all of the dates are running together in the last few months, about self-care as a DEI change agent. Message me on LinkedIn or email me. We'll make sure that we get that to you all, because I really want to encourage you all to really prioritize, self-care as much as you can. But we do need support. And so this is the last question that I have. I do want to turn it over to you all. If you have questions, I see one question came in. So we will definitely get to that question. We probably have time for maybe 2 questions, and then we'll go ahead and close out. So Amelia, what can companies do better to support the people doing the heavy lifting in the work right now?
Capacity, right? I think that a lot of us are doing a lot of work that our teams have shifted. And so for those that are doing the work of 5 or 6 or maybe even more, and they're trying to take on all of this work because the actioning still stands, right? Sometimes you have to deliver on training and mentorship programs and different initiatives, and you're looking at doing that as an individual. Supporting capacity. Where can we take some of the high level projects off of someone's plate and being able to support the key initiatives that we want to continue to move forward with an evaluation? Decision making, right? Don't have people continue to have to justify this work, right? I think that we have to have some really strong leaders and decision makers that are going to commit and be really great partners in organizations, and finding that level of partnership in your organization. I know sometimes it can be really challenging right now because I know that many people are kind of going against the grain, right? That there's a lot of uncertainty and you're going against the grain, but there are more people like you, and leaning in to other practitioners, right? Leaning in for support, leaning into community and saying, hey, I don't have to take this on by myself. There are other individuals that are in the space that can support me, that can support my organization. Perfeqta, a great organization that can support you on this journey, right? So how can you look at some of the outsourcing that's available to support, various pieces around communication, around context, around leadership, around training, all the things that are available. So what are the resources? Because this is not, it's important for everyone to preserve your own well-being. I think that that's my most important message, is thinking about yourself and your own well-being, because even as these seasons change, you want to preserve who you are in the midst of it. And so that's really important. We can't keep fighting the good fight if we're depleted.
Yes. Thank you, Amelia. We can't keep fighting the good fight if we're depleted. That is so real. We got a question about communication. And the question was, let me make sure I read that one. For American companies that are still committed to the work, should they communicate? Sorry, I can't even. Okay, here it is. Should there be an announcement about it? I've received questions from employees who are concerned about the company's stance in light of current discussions. Thoughts on that to our panelists? I have thoughts, and this actually might be our last question. I'm looking at the time.
I'm gonna just say really quickly, I definitely think that companies should make an announcement or say something, right? If they have the capability. And I think that they should very much be, like I said, proactive in that communication. Create your own narrative. Even if your narrative is, even if something is shifting, say the thing so that it doesn't have to be in this place of siloed and thoughts, and people don't have to think anything is not happening because no one's saying anything. So.
Yeah, really, if DEI communications is a regular part of your strategy, that this should be no different, right? If employees are expressing concern, confusion, it would be advantageous to, just reinforce it, right? And if you feel like you've done it before, do it again. Whether that's from the top down, whether that's in your town halls, whether that's through your ERG leaders, your DEI committee leaders, yes, please make sure you do that. One thing I do just want to say as a disclaimer, I did not say this at the beginning, is that for some of you all who may be navigating any type of federal funding, please consult with an attorney, right? We are not attorneys. We are not, just want to say that, consult with your general counsel, consult with your legal counsel when it does come to any changes, reframing, communications, things of that nature. Because that is just an important one I wanted to call out. I hate that we couldn't get to all of the questions today, but if y'all could please email us, message us, we can get back to you with those questions. I will drop our email in here, our main email, and you can also reach out to me as well. I'll drop my LinkedIn in here, but can y'all please give our panelists a round of applause, show them some love? This was phenomenal. Thank y'all so much. Y'all were amazing as always. If you would like some additional resources, I did just drop a link to our resource hub at Perfeqta. Take a look at our DEI framework. It does show how organizations can measure and assess their DEI maturity based on 6 categories. So if you are wondering how can we really deeply embed DEI into this work, you can definitely see a lot of examples in that framework. We have resource guides on inclusive recruiting, hiring, blogs, the whole 9. Make sure you connect with each and every one of us on LinkedIn. And before we close out, I just want to say, Amelia, Liz, Janelle, is there anything that y'all want to say before we wrap up here? Any final words?
I think I'll just go along the theme of the self-care. And as we always say, when you're taking a plane, remember to put on your own life mask first before, you know, assisting others. I think that's a really important thing in this at this sort of moment in time. And I will also leave with, I really do truly believe in my heart of hearts, and the way that I know companies, the way that I do, that this is a moment in time. So it's a hard moment in time, but it's a moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Amelia and Liz, y'all always have a final word.
This too shall pass. This too shall
Here we
pass.
I think for me, it's the hopefulness, because I'm one of those people that's in this category of hopeful. So if we can drive more people to that hope category and that hopefulness, then we can be that change. We can see that transformation. And so I think that it's important to stay hopeful during this time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we are going to stay hopeful. We are going to just let this moment pass because it is just a moment, and y'all just keep doing the good work. We're here to support. Please stay connected with us, get on our newsletter. And if your organization is looking for support on how to navigate at this time, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are pretty accessible. And just thank y'all. I know we went over a couple minutes, but most of y'all stayed and y'all are still here. So I hope that you all got a lot out of this. Please reach out, give us any feedback on it. We will continue to have more of these discussions throughout the year. And so we're really just honored that you all took time out of your day to be here. So thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of your day and your week. I hope that this fills your cup, and we'll see you all next time.